All right, what's going on, everyone? Joined today by Michael Blanchard and Ethan Long to talk about the Patriot Missile Defense System. So this is something I don't have a lot of knowledge around, not any experience with. So I thought we'd bring on a couple experts to kind of fill in some of those gaps. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. Of course. Happy to be here.
All right, so on my screen, I've got Michael on the left, Ethan on the right. Would you guys mind just doing a quick introduction, who you are, what you're working on now, and kind of your how you're connected with the Patriot?
Go ahead, Blanchard. You lead this.
Okay, so I'm a 14 Tango. I'm the launcher guy, goes down range and sets up launchers. Been doing this job for 15 years. Currently teaching senior leader course up at Fort Sill, and went through Master Gunner School a couple years back to learn more about the tactics side. So I'm a little versed on both sides of the MOS.
All right. I also teach senior leader course, but for the 14 Echo, I'm the fire control side of the house. I've actually known Blanchard since 2012 when we were in Korea together. I've been in various tactical positions. I've also helped design and test new missile defense systems that are coming out. And tend to believe I kind of know what I'm talking about when it comes to Patriot. So
it's cool. So I didn't, before we got started, I didn't realize with the different MOSs that there is that fire control piece and then the tactical employment piece. It's similar to field artillery, where we've got the fire direction center and then the actual gunners.
Yeah, you can compare my job to like 13 Juliets.
Mine actually would be almost identical to 13 mics as well. When I was going through one of the courses where we were learning how to teach, there was a 13 mic there and they were explaining their MOS. And I was like, that's what I do, except I shoot some out of the sky instead of hitting some on the ground.
So 13 mics, for people not familiar, those are the rocket artillerymen. So HIMARS, MLRS, stuff like that. But so when we're looking at the Patriot, and the reason I wanted to talk about it is because all of a sudden it popped up. There's a battery, I think, going to Ukraine. It's kind of in the news all of a sudden. And as soon as it hits the news, you get equal reports of it's garbage. It doesn't work. It's never worked. It's the worst system ever. And it's going to be this game changing, never before seen tech. So I'm certain that it's somewhere in the middle, but what's been your guys' experience with it? Is it a quality system? Is it something we're improving upon?
So it is a perpetually improving system. A lot of people that have the opinion that it is a garbage system are left over from things that happened in the early 1990s. When Patriot first came out, it was kind of a happy accident, little history here. It was originally designed to shoot down aircraft. Well, in 1991, they didn't really have anything else. So when Saddam started throwing missiles, they're like, let's see what it does. And it was a terrible engagement capability. It was maybe 25% at best. It missed most of its targets. And that's what people are hanging on to. They're like, oh, it was garbage. Well, 2003, we went back and it shot down all 9 threats that were headed towards, what was it? I can't remember the name of the airbase in Kuwait. It shot down every single one of them. It did miss one, but that was also due to the Patriot clock bug, which if you've ever been to a software development class, it shows you why when you're developing software, rounding up or rounding down is really bad. What it would do kind of in a roundabout way is it would round up so many times and for so long that if you ran the system for 100 hours, it would actually miss targets because it was rounding up in the background repeatedly. Wow. So yeah, the Patriot clock bug has been fixed. We've gone through, the amount of updates since then is mind blowing. We even have Recaro racing seats inside the system nowadays. So yeah, we went from these little fold out garbage little green chairs to Recaro racing seats on top of a ton of software changes and developments. So the system we have today is far more capable than anything we've ever had before. Now, there are about, 50 different variants of Patriot that are out there in the world. So I don't know exactly which one they may be getting, and that could have a huge impact on the tactical side. I don't know if you have anything on that there, Blanchard.
So I don't actually know which one they're getting either, but I will say that there has been, like you were saying, huge leaps and bounds in the capabilities. Right now, we currently have 3 different types of like families of missiles that we can use on them. And they're all basically just evolutions of threats that we've encountered or will encounter. So that's a good thing about Patriot is it's kind of modular. You can change out one section, upgrade a certain section, put in a different missile. As long as everything is copacetic and talks to itself, it's pretty much going to do its job.
Go ahead.
What's the scope of targets that it would try to engage? Like, what's the minimum? It's not going to go after an 82 millimeter mortar. So what's the low end and what's kind of the high end that it would target?
So it is good for it. if it was a happy accident and in the right location, theoretically, you could hit medium and intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's not really designed for that. It's more short range and on the bottom end of medium range ballistic missiles, but it also can shoot down low flying targets like UAVs. Granted, there's a cost assimilation there you have to really look into. It can shoot helicopters or what we call rotary wing ABTs or air breathing threats, fixed wing. Matter of factly, actually 100%, unless Blanchard knows anything I haven't said here, 100% of pilots, whether they're friendly or not, who have ever been engaged by the Patriot missile system, have never survived. It has never failed to take down a plane, which is kind of good and bad because there was 2 fratricide incidents that happened. We shot down a British Tornado and a American F-18. And I don't know if you want me to go into like why that happened. I can elaborate a little bit.
Let's do it. Yeah, just a couple minutes on that. I think it's probably worth it.
All right. It was a series of unfortunate events that all stacked on top of each other. So unfortunate event number 1, this Patriot unit was off by themselves. It didn't have any comms with the higher echelon unit. Now, America doesn't employ forces that way anymore. We are in a network, and we'll get into that. Unfortunate event number 2 is that these pilots, as they go in to bomb somebody in Iraq, they would shut off their identify friend or foe system, and they were supposed to turn it on coming back out. They didn't. Unfortunate event number 3 is these Patriot units had been engaging short-range ballistic missiles, which have a certain flight profile. Now, the system cannot turn anything into hostile, but it can classify something as a missile. And people are like, well, a missile is hostile. Not in air defense world. So hostile is a very specific term. So as these pilots came back in, they flew that flight profile, and the system classified them as a missile. It didn't classify them as a plane. And back then, unfortunate event number, what are we on, 4 or 5? Operators were told that the system is smarter than you. So when the system classifies something as a missile, you need to trust it. We now know this to be false, and we train a very different way than we used to. So the soldiers engaged it and thought they were shooting down another missile. Turns out they eliminated pilots. It was a very bad sequence of events, but it taught us so very much. We also introduced things like, Sergeant Blanchard could speak to this, the Master Gunner course, the Top Gunner course, or Top Gun course, excuse me, and positions like a DAFCO, which is Air Defense Artillery Fire Control Officer. And that's an officer position who sits in a certain location, and they talk Army to Air Force and Air Force to Army. So everybody knows what is in the air at any given time.
And so, just to add a little bit to that, keep in mind, all of those happened within basically the same week. Like it was a very short time frame. So had there been more time, they would have been able to correct some of those deficiencies. But yeah, like you said, I've spoken to an operator that was operating the system around that time. That's exactly what they're told by Raytheon. Don't just trust the system. Put it in automatic and just let it do its thing. And now we know better. So
yeah,
it's tempting. It's tempting. I mean, because these systems are smart and they know what they're doing and they can do things so much faster than we can. So I know I got it. It's tempting to say, fine, push the button. If you're looking at a Patriot battery and I say, I'm going to put a Patriot battery around my house, is everything like within that one launcher? Are there multiple pieces of equipment? How does that all tie together?
So it has up to, I'm trying to remember the Wikipedia answer here. I think they say up to 8 launchers is the Wikipedia answer.
Per battery.
Yep, per battery. Yep. And that is the downrange equipment. That's more Sergeant Blanchard's side of the house, right? So my side of the house, the fire control, is the other elements. So we have the radar, which is a love-hate relationship. I love that radar, but sometimes she's temperamental. And then right behind that, you have the ECS, or the engagement control station, which is where we sit inside of. There's no windows, there's no nothing. You're just in a box fighting the fight. You have the AMG, which is an antenna mast group, which it's like a big taco truck, almost like a transformer. This thing like folds out and there's giant antennas that go up to 110 feet, 11 inches in the air. So that's how we talk. Those are line of sight antennas that talk between Patriot units. And then we have the EPP, or the electric power plant, or it's electric power plant. I always mess that one up. And that has 2 150 kilowatt generators on there. And each of those generators push out Patriot prime power, which is 208 volts, 3-phase, 400 hertz. And the cool thing about that is you can parallel them. So you can have one running the system, and without shutting anything else down, you can fire up the other one, swap over power, and shut down one so you can keep running continuously.
And that is the Patriot system.
Yeah, that is with the launchers and all that. That is the system together.
There's also the addition of the BCP, the Battery Command Post. That's
Oh, I
basically
forgot.
where our people with the early warning access. They have access to the Link 16 network. They can see the joint networks of all the tracks that are currently out there published by the Air Force, Navy, or whoever's publishing to that. And they play a huge pivotal role in the Patriot system. They manage all of our reports. If they see any launches, we know way ahead of time, so we can get postured and everything. So that's something that I think I don't remember when that was implemented, but that was a huge piece.
Yeah, the on the tactical side of the house, to elaborate on that a little bit. So what they do for us is, like he said, early warning, but they also self-report. The F-16 that a week after those fratricide incidents shot the Patriot system didn't know it was firing at a Patriot system. It just knew it was firing at a radar. So with the BCP, it reports our location, says, "Hey, I'm here," so that those pilots know that's a friendly asset on the ground. Yeah. And then number two, they also, with their access to the Link network, if let's say an AWACS or pick an aircraft is up in the air and they positively identify something as a friend, the BCP can then see that, because Patriot kind of fights in a vacuum, but we're working on networking out to other things with new systems that are coming online. But I can just go, "Hey, BCP, what's the Link ID on this?" And they'll tell me, "Oh yeah, that's a Link ID of friend." Boom. I don't got to worry about that item. I don't got to worry about that track. I can continue to fight everything else that's in the air because somebody else in the Air Force said that this is a friendly track and I don't need to worry about it. So
When you're looking at the Patriot, and I know I'm not assuming that you guys know every air defense system around the world as well as you know the Patriot, but just in your, offhand, what does the Patriot do well compared to other systems, and where does it fall short? Where are some areas that it's still improving?
So
let me see.
I'll
Go
say
ahead.
for areas that falls short is it's not really falling short anymore with the upgrades that it's getting. And I know Ethan can talk way more on that, but it's just kind of been ahead of the game. And most of the things I'll say that the enemies have adapted to is basically based on Patriot. There have been a lot of threats that came out from our enemies that were based to counter or created to counter Patriot, because it's always been a huge pivotal air defense asset. And if you can counter Patriot, you can have air dominance or air superiority, whatever. And I would say compared to other air defense systems that I know of that are around the same, like S-300, it's way more advanced. It's been upgraded more. The S-300 is a little bit archaic. And from someone who I just spoke to recently that is working directly with the 14 Tango Ukrainians, they say it takes 5 people to operate where Ethan would be, the engagement control station. And each one of those people have a certain job in engaging those tracks. And they all have to communicate with each other with 5 people in one box. And you can ask him, having just 3 people that we have, it gets chaotic in there. So
I've grabbed a hold of lieutenants.
Yeah, it can get pretty bad. So basically, I mean, we're more mobile, I think, more advanced than our counterparts. And I think overall, we're just providing a little bit better of a footprint and predictability.
Yeah. I would back all of that. And I think it's really hard to make the comparison that Patriot is better or worse than anything else, because the United States, unlike a lot of other countries, they put all their eggs in one basket and they go, "This is my system and this is what I want," right? So they have that one system and it's supposed to cover everything. And we know that that is not a good air defense picture, because so a ground-based sensor is a victim of the conditions, circumstances, and topography of the area of which it's placed in. So that means that no matter how powerful of a radar you have, on paper, the S-400 can reach out to 600 kilometers, and on paper in Wikipedia, Patriot can see out to 100 miles. So that would say that one of those can see farther than the other. However, you have to take into account things like the curvature of the earth and massed terrain, which you can't see through mountains, you can't see through buildings, you can't see through trees. However, the United States, the way we employ air defense forces is we'll have ground-based sensors, Salt Bay, a couple of F-35s in there, grab a Sentinel, put an Aegis in some water somewhere, and boom, you have a network. So you have eyes in all directions. So the enemy's ability to hide aircraft or missiles behind mountains and in ravines is significantly lowered when fighting against the United States when they're properly employed. Now, other countries, they just put one system, like, I can see forever, and we can sneak up on them 100% of the time. So to put it simply, what I would say is, in a proper network with proper communications, one of the smallest radar cross-section aircraft that we publicly know about is the F-22. It's about the size of a bumblebee, or 0.0001 meters squared. And with a proper network, an F-22 would get close, but you couldn't get through. I would be genuinely surprised if it could get through, honestly.
And that, to be fair, is talking about US or NATO running and setting up that sort of infrastructure. That's probably not what we would expect in Ukraine in 6 months or whatever the timeline is. They have this up and running. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, from my understanding, it's adding to their air defense. We're not sending it to them to like replace anything. So they're going to keep what they already have. But this is going to help kind of cover some of those gaps they have. It's going to provide them a little bit more capabilities, and it's just adding to the equipment they have. So it's more bullets in the gun, basically.
Yeah, they're doing quite well with the Stingers. Honestly, I've been incredibly impressed. I did not know that Stingers had the capability to shoot down cruise missiles. That has been super cool. I mean, I theorized about it, but you have to be behind it. And usually when you're behind something, it's already killed you by that time. But they've employed manpad systems and forces everywhere so that as these cruise missiles are going into Kyiv or Donbass or wherever, they are behind them and can actually shoot them down, because cruise missiles cruise at around 500 miles an hour, give or take, and Stingers travel in Mach 2.3 unclassified. So they're able to get these threats. So like Sergeant Blanchard said, they are augmenting the forces that they already have. So mainly Patriot's going to be used for tactical ballistic missile threat, or TBM threat, and that is going to be a huge force multiplier for them to put up a ballistic missile protective zone. It's not going to cover all of Ukraine. It's not, but it is going to cover a certain small area.
One of the big things I've noticed in this conflict, or we've kind of seen play out at least, is kind of the swarming concept. We're actually seeing it for the first time, where it's just been, or at least from my opinion, it's been theorized a lot. But in some cases, Russia's sending all these cheap drones, cheap Iranian made, or in some case Russian made drones. And in a perfect world, if you're sending those, you overwhelm the enemy's air defenses, and it creates gaps for other things. If the Patriot, and then one of the arguments for the Patriot is, what a waste of resources. You're going to use a Patriot to shoot down this lawnmower in the sky. How does the Patriot handle that sort of swarm stuff? Is that something you guys deal with and work through?
So it will see it. As long as the system is configured correctly, it will see each one of those individually. Now that has to go with cost estimation. The Emiratis in 2021 shot a $200 Walmart drone with a $3.5 million MSE Patriot missile. So it will hit. A lot of people out there, they're sneaking by in Saudi Arabia. Well, the Saudis and the Emiratis have the exact same system, and one of them has threats sneaking through, and the other one doesn't. That's not a system issue. That's a configuration issue. As for drone swarms, Patriot is not designed to handle things like that. But part of this most recent package does come with Avenger weapon systems. And Avenger weapon systems, the Stingers are staggeringly cheaper, but it also has a 50 cal on there that can track these things down. So now you have Humvee mounted 50 cals with the ability to use infrared and possibly Sentinel radar if they have that configuration. And those will handle the swarms significantly better than Patriot would. But
that sounds like a manual issue then. In the Patriot, somebody's making the decision of like, do not use the missile on that thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they should be. I mean, we're going to give them the best advice that we possibly can while they're here training. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's how they want to employ it. If they want to shoot, those drones with a multi-million-dollar missile, that's on them. But I mean, there's ways that the radar can handle it. I think if the operators are smart and take our advice, they'll be able to not necessarily counter it, but not be overly saturated.
Makes sense. And some of these waves have been a lot, but still I think 50 or 60 might have been peak, and that was across the whole country. So with air defenses scattered all across all of Ukraine, I don't think it's necessarily overwhelming. But on that note, is there anything you guys have picked up from this conflict that you're studying or you're looking into? Because this is like, it's crazy. All of a sudden, air defense is playing a major, major role in a conventional conflict.
What's interesting is I teach my students every single class that I have. The next major war will be won or lost by a nation's ability to construct a good air defense system, or like picture. Because it costs lives when you send your army. It costs lives when you send your air force. It costs money when you send missiles and drones. It costs almost nothing. So you can save your forces by sending these autonomous things. And if a nation doesn't have an ability to set up a good air defense, like perfect example is 1991, the air campaign of Desert Storm, if people have never studied that, it's a testament to a nation's inability to construct a good air defense around their assets. So I'm actually not surprised that air defense is playing such a pivotal role. I've been telling students for years that air defense is probably one of the most important things going forward in modern combat of anywhere.
So for me, I would say the use of SHORAD, or the short range air defense, has been huge. For a couple of years in the, I would say, the past decade, America almost got rid of entirely the SHORAD program. They were starting to force out some of the people in that MOS and pushing them over to my MOS because they're very similar. But then as that started happening, they started seeing these emerging threats coming, because, you know, the enemy is really good at starting to increase their threats in areas that were weaker. So we started phasing out SHORAD, and then immediately they're like, oh, that was a terrible idea. So they started bringing them back, and they started giving them upgrades. They're going to start being mounted on armored vehicles instead of the Humvees. They're not going to be made out of plywood anymore. So there's a lot of upgrades they're getting to the seekers themselves, the systems. So SHORAD going from almost phased out completely to being the star of the battle has been amazing to watch. I work directly with the 14 Papas, who used to be the 14 Sierras. They're the Avenger guys, the CRAM guys, and they, just talking to them, it's amazing watching them go from being almost museum pieces to now like everyone wants it.
It's crazy. Like it's so easy to compare Russia to the United States and say, well, they didn't. It's a different military, right? So they fight differently. They weren't. They would definitely prefer air superiority, but that doesn't play the same role that it does in our military. But it's been off the table for so long because Ukraine scattered their air defenses and then flooded the country with these air defenses. It's wild. Yeah, I'm sure you guys are gonna have lessons to learn coming out of this for years.
I can't wait. I mean, every time. So the main takeaway, I think, that is the big thing, and I don't know if we got much time, but this should be at least the significance of this system going over there is we're taking arguably one of the most powerful high fidelity radars in the world, and we're pointing it right down the barrel of what could potentially be World War III. So there's really no way for this to lose, right? Like, don't get me wrong, everyone's worried, like, well, what if it falls into the enemy's hands? It's old stuff. We have LTAMs, IBCS, like there's so many new systems coming online. It's cool. If we lose it, it's no big deal, right? But the amount of information we can gain, and people don't understand, is every time somebody fires a missile and a NATO or American sensor detects it, we now know its capability. So in 2022, January 24th, right after, I've actually seen the videos and pictures and stuff, but we had Emirati THAAD and American Patriot had a simultaneous engagement of a threat from the Houthi rebels fired into Al Dhafra Air Base. And we learned a lot from that. Every time someone fires something, we learn about it, but we also learn about our capabilities too. So I think that's the big takeaway, is that this system is going to tell us so much about kinematic capabilities.
I'm a little salty about that engagement too, because I just left that area 4 months prior to that engagement. And I've been waiting 14 years to do my job, just waiting for someone to shoot at us, and I missed it.
Next time.
Yeah, next time.
The counter to that, is there anything that Russia would be able to, because so the concern that equipment is going to fall into an adversary's hands, look, it's weird to see MRAPs blown up in like in the way that they are in Russia. I mean, plenty got blown up in Iraq and Afghanistan, but it is weird seeing Western equipment and US equipment 777s, seeing those destroyed. It's a weird feeling. I can't describe it exactly. It's going to happen. And eventually, if Russia will destroy HIMARS, and they'll destroy an Abrams when they get there, and Bradleys and all that. Patriot's a little different because it's not going to be 5 miles behind the front, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no.
Is there anything with the Patriot being actively engaged with Russian missiles and aircraft where they could learn from those capabilities, or what does that look like?
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the same thing. Absolutely, they can learn pretty much anything that like we do. Like anytime, like he said, anytime we fire a missile or they fire a missile, the other person learns a lot. So they'll be able to learn a lot about our missiles. But at the same time, what they learn and they counter with ours, we will be learning from their counter as well. It's like a kind of a counter. So like he said earlier, there's no lose this. Like if we are constantly engaging their tracks successfully, then we know what, hey, we are really more advanced. If a couple slip through, then we know back here, we know what to improve on and we know what to adapt to. So there's learning going to happen on both sides, whether it gets overrun or not. Like we're going to probably gain more information than they will, to be honest.
And I guess if you're not, if the US, if the Patriot isn't picking something up, Russia won't necessarily know that.
Yeah.
Or if they are picking something up and saying, we're actually going to engage that with a different asset, Russia might view it. Yeah. So there's a lot of,
there's a lot of, so the way Patriot engages as well, and the reason why it's so scary and so good at its job is it's similar to certain air-to-air missiles. It's a track while scan system. So the entire time that missile is in flight, that pilot has no idea it's coming. He has no clue. The Patriot doesn't paint the target. It doesn't do anything like that. It sends the missile and it sees the target, and the radar goes, hey, missile, go left, go right. It guides the missile in the whole way, but it doesn't paint the target. The last split second, probably around half a second, it lets go and the missile paints the target. And so the pilot has about half a second to eject or die. Like, that's their choice. That's what they get to do. Wow. Which is why no pilot has ever survived a Patriot engagement, because you have so little time to react. By the time you know it's there, there's nothing you can do.
And another thing is one thing that the Russians won't be able to learn is our TTPs of how we incorporate the Patriot system. So the way that Ukrainians use it, they might be engaging at different altitudes, different ranges than what we've trained ourselves to engage. So you might see different probability of kills from the tracks that they're engaging than what we would get, because we engage differently. We man it differently, or we just the TTPs in general. So we'll be able to see the Patriot system. They'll be able to learn more about the Patriot system, but the way we use it is going to still be, not up on the table, I guess, until, if that ever has to happen, then they'll be able to figure it out.
I will also say, on the count of our operators, I don't want to speak poorly about any other nation out there, any other country. I've done training exercises or war games with other countries that are also using Patriot. Some of them have had Patriot for years and years and years. And our operators are on such a higher level when it comes to that. It is almost unattainable. Like, I could read you the .86, which is our gunnery, our gunnery Bible, and what operators have to go through. I genuinely believe that in like World War III, our operators would be bored because there's so little going on. Like, there's so much that they handle at any given time. I mean, fingers moving on the keyboards and on the switch indicators like no one's business, because that's the level that we train our operators to nowadays.
So that's,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's going to be an issue, because this is a different type of equipment that Ukraine is getting their hands on. It is, in some ways comparable to the S-300 in a sense, but I feel like a couple takeaways of mine in this whole process has been, we for all of the military technology that's out there and how fancy it is, it's really built for the lowest common denominator. Like,
it is, yes.
We aren't that smart we aren't. And this isn't rocket science. It's built to be dumbed down. That still takes some time to learn and to perfect and get to that point you're talking about, where they're just hammering the keyboards all day long. But it is attainable, and it'll be interesting to see how these operators come out of Fort Sill. I don't know if they're there for 3 months, 6 months. I don't know how long that is, but it's a big ask.
Yeah, I know for us, we trained, like for my job, the Echo, the fire control side of the house, we're there for 19 weeks. But we also don't know as much as we think we do. Leaving, like they tell you, you're going to learn that when you get to your unit. Most of it's maintenance that we learn.
Sure.
So one of the interesting things about, like I said earlier, I was talking to the guy that's directly in charge of training these guys. One of the interesting things is the people that they have here right now training have massive backgrounds in construction, engineering, mechanics, and stuff like that. Because, they come from all walks of life, but it just so happens that these guys are like super, super smart. And during their training, they're out there just blowing these instructors' minds. They're able to do the reloads sometimes faster than we are, like with the forklift and the GMT, which is our guided missile transport. It's like crane operated reload systems. And they were saying that for the S-300, it takes them anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to do a reload. And they've got like a little claw system that, that they use to reload the missiles. But right now, they're able to use the GMT and the forklift anywhere between 33 and 20 minutes. So they're able to like cut the time way, way down and get more missiles out there. Like it's...
That's
you don't
lower
want to
than
see
our
that
standard.
reload.
Like,
there's probably safety violations left and right. But hey,
you know what? Results.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my always pitch for the National Guard or Reserve is they're not full-time. We're not full-time, but these guys have so much other experience that they're able to problem solve in ways that when I was active, and my experience in the active side is like, we couldn't quite get out of that box. But like this random accountant or engineer or whatever has a way to do it. I don't know, maybe it's outside the safety standards, but that's a good point. These guys aren't all lifelong air defenders. They're coming in from all walks of life.
Yeah, and that we're a little bit more cautious with, you know, damaging the equipment, because, you know, we're not at war, so we're going to pay for everything we damage. But over there, you know, hey, get the job done, get those missiles up there.
Yeah, you know, but I can understand that. So it's interesting. I came from being a 19 kilo over to air defense, and as a tanker, I understand like there's a way the book says to do it, and then there's the way it actually happens, right? So like the book answer for engaging a tank is, you know, gunner, sabo, tank, identify, range, blah blah blah. You know, on the way, boom, right? Every tanker who's ever fired a main gun round in combat will tell you that's not it. They just scream, shoot that MF. Like they're just like, there's none of that, right? So it's funny, when I was downrange this last time, and I was actually at the PAT site that fired in January of 2022, but I was there in 2016. I told my my tangos, my downrange guys, like Sergeant Blanchard here, I said, look, my only goal is that if we are overran, I want to have no missiles left on my site. That's all I want. Just get them on the rails as fast as you can. If I'm going to die, I better be out of ammo when I die. Like, that's all I want. And they were like, yep, we can make that happen.
It's a way to go.
Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, guys, is there any myths or rumors you hear kind of percolating about the Patriot that were worth bringing up? We hit on a lot of stuff here, so don't mean to pressure you, but if there's anything we didn't get to that's kind of just burning you up over the last few months.
So I will say,
go ahead.
So one thing that I'm seeing, I wouldn't say is necessarily a myth, but it's kind of an unknown, is depending on how many batteries that we send, or how much equipment we give them, what's that going to do for our deployability and our readiness. So if we're giving them a lot of equipment, that's great. But if something happens in the meantime, what is that going to do to us? Like, do we want to go so far into helping them that it ends up costing us an asset that we really need in the event that it's needed? So that's one thing that I'm kind of keeping my eye on, is exactly how we're going to go about this, where the equipment's coming from, whether that's from the Pacific, Europe, the United States, CENTCOM, like where is that going to come from?
That's a good point, especially when we get into stuff like the Patriot that is actively being used in the military. It's not always just old Humvees getting pulled from National Guard yards that haven't been touched in 10 years. So it's a good point.
Yeah, definitely. On that note, it's Patriot is a finite resource anywhere that it goes. We don't have as many of them as certain commanders would like. In reference to that, we have things called the CAL and DAL, right? And this is completely unclassed. This is public information. CAL is critical asset list. And that's based off of the criticality, vulnerability, recuperability, and threat to an area. And that creates a list for like 4 stars and stuff. And then we have the DAL, which is the defended asset list. And they prioritize, you know, based off of the criticality of something, which ones are defended. And the reality is we will never be able to properly defend all of the critical list because we don't have the resources it would require. So we usually, like, we base it off a priority, but it's kind of a screwed up way of playing God, so to speak, right? Like, we can't risk this asset, so we need to have these assets here, which means that this thing's going to fall off of the defended asset list. So just like, you know, Sergeant Blanchard said, I would have to say that where these systems are coming from could have a huge impact on American forces deployed worldwide.
Awesome. We could probably wrap it up there. I'll put both of your social media accounts in the description below. So if anybody has any questions, they're going to hit these comments. Maybe you guys can come back and answer those for me, because I still feel like I don't know very much about Patriot. But definitely go check these 2 guys out. Sergeant Blanchard, Sergeant Long, thank you so much for taking the time. Keep up the great work at Fort Sill, and looking forward to staying in touch.
All right. Thank you.